The government is stressing social distancing as one of the main practices to counter the spread of the dreaded COVID-19 in Jamaica. We heard that from last March. But for residents of several of the corporate area's toughest inner city communities, such a practice may be classified as wishful thinking. Yeah. I had a friend who told me that I'm kind of surprised that more people have not tested positive because of that, what they call the big yard. We have with us now Dr. Henley Morgan, who is the founder and the chief executive officer of the Agency for Inner City Renewal. Good morning, sir. Welcome to Smile Jamaica once again.
Morning, Dr.
Good morning to the beautiful and talented Dahlia Harris and the irrepressible Neville Bell.
Thank you very much, sir.
Of course, maybe Neville, you may prefer beautiful and talented.
Well, I kind of like the talented one, the part that you leave out. But, Dr. Morgan, great to have you with us. As I said, sir, I have this friend who said, boy, I'm surprised that more of us have not tested positive because there are so many big yards around, and if one person get it in there, that would spell a lot of trouble. What are your thoughts on that? I know, obviously, they can't social distance, can they?
Well, you know, Neville and Dahlia, I'm really glad you're focusing on this issue. You know, my kind of experience sort of like from Uptown to Trenchtown and these communities being my reality. But you know what amazes me? That a lot of the people who are policymakers, who are now in government, who are corporate tycoons, were in the inner city. That's where they grew up. And yet, none of the policies dealing with COVID-19 reflects that reality. Take the one you mentioned about social distancing and the history of tenement yards, okay? And the type of housing. 1/3 of Jamaicans are in squatting situations. How do you get social distancing in that kind of arrangement, where much of one's life is spent outside of what you would call the dwelling place, the residence?
Yeah.
It's really an issue. And so social distancing can be achieved, but one has to come at those protocols from the reality of what exists.
Yeah. It extends, I believe, as well, Dr. Morgan, to the matter of lockdowns, because whereas for some, being locked down at home gives them enough space to do so, sometimes we see people in the underserved communities out on the street, and people say, oh, they're breaking lockdown, but if there are 20 of us in a yard, 9 of us in a home, it's difficult for 9 of us to be in there 3 days straight.
Dahlia, you are so correct. And by the way, this did not just start with COVID-19.
Correct.
Zozo, SOEs. And do you know, although there is research needs to be done in it in Jamaica, domestic violence increases
globally
when people have to stay at home. Even in the United States, with people working from home within dysfunctional families, there has been a tendency for violence to increase. Yes, so there are a lot of implications, but the one I don't want the viewers to miss is the fact that with COVID-19, people at the base of the social and economic pyramid are more at risk. They have a greater incidence of comorbidities, of like underlying issues like hypertension, asthma. Their diets are maybe not what it should be. Their visits to doctors are irregular. So they are the ones who are most affected in terms of hospitalizations and even deaths, which takes us to the issue of vaccines and how people in these communities view vaccines in a situation in which the trust in the authorities is very low.
Yeah. Dr. Morgan, what do you say to the government about what we're talking about here, and what do you say to those people who live in these communities? What do you say to the government first, as far as looking after, which these are my words, looking after the people that Dahlia said in the underserved communities, and what do you say to those people? How do they look after themselves?
Well, one of the things we have to recognize, and a study was done fairly recently about the social safety net. and the social safety net is inadequate. People are falling through the cracks. Poverty is increasing. I'm sure when we get the data, it will show that. Health problems are increasing. A microscope is now placed on the inadequacy of housing. The government, admittedly, does not have a lot of wiggle room and has done quite well under this unprecedented circumstances. So I'm not saying government is going to be able to find a lot of money to throw at the problems right away. To the persons, the people in the communities, I would just like to say, this thing is like a double whammy. You're already dealing with 1,300 homicides, murders per year, 80% of which occurs in these communities or to people living in these communities. Now you have COVID-19, which has already gone through about 1,800 people. If you annualize that, it's probably about 800-900. Take this real. In a way, I believe living in a high-stress, high-crime environment, it kind of gives people an attitude like, I don't know this, right? I mean, we're used to this. And so even their response to vaccination is almost nonchalant.
Yeah, yeah.
Wake up.
I want
This is the Grim Reaper.
Yeah, I want to raise as well, Doc. Sometimes we see, and I was saying it to Neville, in times like these, we see the best of us and we also see the worst of us. And I feel like sometimes people overlook the communities because we don't live there and we feel like this has nothing to do with us. But the reality is people in those communities work in corporate Jamaica and in business places. And so we have to be concerned about what happens with them, particularly in a pandemic.
Consumers. They are also consumers.
They are consumers. So it's important.
Even though they are at the base of the economic pyramid, but being at the base means that you're probably holding it up.
Yeah.
And, you know, we won't be able to go through the various ways in which communities are impacted. And there are about 600 informal communities in Jamaica. But it impacts education, health, work, nutrition is a big, big one because kids go to school to eat.
Yes.
Parenting. And whatever you see and you hear reported through the news, you have to put that under a microscope. When you look at inner city, the impact is much more severe.
You mentioned vaccination.
Because people do not have alternatives.
Yeah, you mentioned vaccination. What's the word on that, sir, from you?
Well, recently in an RGR Gleaner poll as to whether vaccination should be mandated, the result was 70% believed that it should not be mandated. Now, in the United States, 42% of the adult population are opposed to vaccination, mainly due to political reasons. We don't have an exact figure for Jamaica, but it could almost be close to that 70%. And like I said, low trust. I know the Prime Minister think he's doing a great job being the voice and the face, but you know, in studies, it has shown that politicians are at the bottom in terms of the trust that people have in politicians. So I think not only the message, but the messengers. And I'm not suggesting here that Vibes Cartel has to be that person, but we need some changes because there's a lot of distrust among the populace in general and inner city people in particular.
This Sunday Gleaner article, speaking to residents in some of these communities, one of them said they're pleading for cleaning supplies from the authorities to help with sanitization. I think at the very basic level, that's something that should happen. That if we say to people, you have to sanitize if I have to choose between feeding the child and buying something to sanitize, I'm going to feed the child. So do you think that there should be, as we speak, some type of program?
Look,
yeah.
I subscribe to what is called the 80-20 rule, Pareto analysis.
Right.
That you can't fix everything, but try fix the 20% that's going to give you 80% of the outcomes you don't want. So, you know, my mantra, no child left behind. I was speaking to the principal of the early childhood institution. Lovely. You should visit it in Trenchtown. World class. Over 200 students. And I said, Teacher Faye, what's that? She said, two things I can tell you. One, the kids have lost almost a year in just even basic literacy. And two, they come to school for nutrition. First, and then she said something very important. The way we teach, we do mentoring, we do coaching, we do parenting. And especially with the boys, that only happens in an in-person relationship. So I would say, along with the other things you are suggesting, and you know, consider that with these kids online. As a matter of fact, in communities like Trenchtown, the internet is so unstable. The utilities do not give to these communities the same level of service, even though they have to pay for it, as they do in other communities. So my mantra is no child left behind.
Thank you, sir. Always great to see you. Thanks for speaking with us this morning. Stay safe, sir, and God bless you.
And thank you very much. I am a fan. Keep me entertained and informed every morning, as you have been doing for these many years.
Thanks for watching, sir. God bless you.
God bless you.
All right. That's Dr. Henley Morgan, founder and CEO of the Agency for Inner City Renewal.